It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we doing on this Tomlin Tuesday?
Tired, beat. We had a long day today. We had practice and Tomlin. I'm not built for that. I'm not used to it. It's too much. I'm wiped out.
I'm a casual when it comes to this. I had no clue that Tomlin Tuesday was even taking place today. But it turns out like this isn't how it typically goes. That's why I was thrown off, because I saw they were practicing and I was like, oh, okay, so no Tomlin Tuesday on Tuesday, but just took place after practice. Threw me off.
Yeah. So late Tomlin, good mid-afternoon from Mike Tomlin to it. And practice early. Yeah, normally after a Thursday night game, they would practice on Monday and then have Tuesday. The players would have Tuesday off, and Tomlin talked to us on Tuesday. They flipped it around this week, give the coaching staff a little bit more time to do some self-scouting, really come up with some things they wanted to hone in on today. And today's practice was like not practice, like not to say that wasn't productive, but it was like walkthrough pace, like basically, like it was all about like going over some really fine details and then getting into some red zone stuff and some short yardage stuff. I felt like there was a real specific agenda for today's practice, as opposed to just like, hey, let's go hit some people, sharpen the tools, kind of typical stuff.
Okay, well, let's talk about that first and foremost. Not only, obviously, Tomlin talking about that, but in the practice setting, that being something that they really wanted to focus on was the short yardage, the goal line stuff. We talked about that, feeling like that's the difference. How many times have we seen over the course of this season them just coming up a yard or two short, whether it is, on third down, on fourth down, in the goal line, it being the difference between a new set of downs or having to settle for a field goal. There's just been so many things where this team just has not been very good in short yardage situations. I don't know if he dove it. He's probably not going to dive into specifics in terms of what they feel like they need to do to get better in those areas, but clearly an emphasis being put on the short yardage situations.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty clearly to everyone the thing that needed to work, right? I mean, it's not like Tomlin came out there and broke some new ground or anything that was mystifying to all of us. It was pretty clear that's where the team needed the most work, and then went and sought out ways to try to figure it out. I think as much of this is like on the coaching staff as it is the players. I mean, Russ had the interception. Jalen Warren fumbled at the 1, but I think this is mostly about like Arthur Smith and getting in there and finding some stuff that's going to work, whether it is Justin Fields or if it's not, how they get the Russell Wilson quarterbacked offense to be as efficient in the red zone as it was when Fields was running it. And I mean, like, especially when you're talking about like not being in pads and just like walking around, like that pace to me says this is just as much about putting the guys in the right places as it is the people making the plays. If Mike Tomlin had gone through 10 weeks of tape and he's like, oh, well, our red zone offense is no good because our wide receivers dropped 10 passes, or our offensive line can't block, or our quarterback keeps missing them, I think the answer would have been a day full of like individual drills, physical reps on like fine details for players, right? But the fact that it's like a walkthrough kind of gives it away for me. That's like, hey, we're not putting guys in the right position. The point of a walkthrough is to get the guy in the right spot. Like, so that tells me is like basically, hey, we're not getting the guys in the right spot.
Well, one thing that you mentioned within there was the utilization of Justin Fields, and I guess, I don't know, maybe it's people that I'm following or not following that I haven't seen a ton of it, but you mentioned to me right before we started recording, you were kind of picking my brain to see how I felt about it, because it seems like there's a lot of people that aren't interested in seeing more of Justin Fields and think they need to like dial it. But like, I thought that I still haven't seen it be executed the way that I would like it to be. But I thought from the first week of seeing it really against the Ravens to this game, there was at least slight improvement. I think they need to get, again, better at the execution of doing so, not getting the calls in late as part of that as well. But, you know, I'm not certainly in that group of people that think we need to see it less. I would like to see it more. I just think they need to be better at doing it.
Yeah, I think more, right? Like, I was like, I don't know. I don't understand the thought process of saying like this was a bad idea. It obviously didn't work, but like it was a good idea. Like right? Like that's not crazy.
This kind of goes into a different conversation, obviously much different, kind of comparing apples to oranges here, but the process over the results conversation that we had yesterday, like just with the team outlook in general. I understand the process of what they're trying to do with Justin Fields, and I would continue to try to do it despite them not yet seeing fruit be bared because of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It seemed like such an obvious thing to do. And again, like I didn't love the way they went about it, just in terms of like we broke it down. Like I wanted them out there on 4th and 1. I wanted them out there on the 2-point conversion. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, I would, and I think that they're going to continue to try to. I don't think they're going to be discouraged here by the results of this within a short period of time, and then try to, like scrap it from their playbook or anything like that. I would imagine that we continue to see that, and I think that he can impact in a positive way the short yardage and the goal line situations that they've struggled with. Real quick, just want to note on this, since we're talking about the offense and Arthur Smith in general, his name added to what was it called, a bid board, hot board, whatever it is, as a name to keep an eye on for the UNC head coaching job after they're moving on from Mac Brown. We just talked yesterday about Zach Azzani in Central Michigan, now Art Smith in UNC. I'm not putting any credence into this, but just imagine if he were to end up taking that job, Zach Azzani also goes to Central Michigan, how different things could look. Not I expect them to.
Yeah, I don't buy this. Like I just going from wide receivers coach to a head coach at a group of 5 is one thing. Steelers offensive coordinator to the head coach at North Carolina. I just don't buy it, man. Like nobody cares about that team. I remember covering Pitt games there when like Carolina was ranked and like the better of the two teams, and there'd be like 12,000 people there. I can't imagine Arthur Smith wanting that job. I just can't.
Okay, you're saying you wouldn't buy it then on the prospects of him having interest in them, not the other way around. Like you think they could certainly have interest in him.
Sure. And like, let's be honest, like this is a college, someone who's covering North Carolina, who is writing this story, who is getting, I mean, they're not talking to Arthur Smith. They're talking to Carolina people like, oh yeah, we're going to reach out to this guy and this guy. And this is a shopping list. This is not a realistic, not necessarily a realistic, people that are interested in the job, and that there's two-way interest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point too. Like, I don't know. Hey, what is his? I mean, I guess I've never really dug into it. Arthur Smith, what was his coaching route? Like, how did he get to the position he's in? Like, how much time, if at all, did he even spend in the coaching range? Like, is that somebody you could even see having that type of position?
Well, he did coach at Carolina. He was there. And he is a UNC alum, so like there is a connection
from that standpoint, sure,
to the place. But like, he had 1 year coaching in college, maybe 2 years coaching in college. He was on the Redskins staff with the Shanahans and that whole group of like 12 guys that end up being head coaches, and then started with the Titans. And then worked his way up from the Titans, from a quality control coach to an offensive line coach. Spent some time as tight ends coach, and then was offensive coordinator.
Okay. So, I mean, especially though, like the new landscape of college football, you've been around Art for a little bit covering him. Could you imagine him as a head coach somewhere, like having to dive into the NIL and the recruiting side of things?
I can't imagine anyone wanting to be a mid-tier ACC head coach more than being any NFL coordinator, not just Steelers, like literally any.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean. It's a totally different landscape. That's why it's like, even if it was something he would have considered in the past, that's why I think it's like a different conversation now. Something we didn't touch on yet with, just in regards to Tomlin's availability in today's practice, some injury updates. I know that I saw that you put out that Alex Highsmith did not practice, didn't really do much of anything. Do you think that that's, as we sit here on Tuesday, something to be concerned about with his availability, or where are we at?
Well, it's not good news, but I wouldn't say it rules him out. Still got two whole 3 whole more days of practice before the game. So, I mean, we've seen lots of guys over the years have a like DNP limited full play kind of. So even if he doesn't practice tomorrow, I wouldn't say that would rule him out, but I would say it's not good news. It's not like he's at the front end of the curve there. I just I mean, it's not great, but it's not awful. I talked to Alex a good bit. He's pushing, but I think he's being smart about it. He's a really competitive guy, and he's really pissed off about the number of injuries he's had this year. This is the 3rd one, but I think
tomorrow a big day. You think though? Like, do you think he's got to probably do something tomorrow in some capacity?
I would be surprised if he's not at least limited tomorrow.
Okay. All right. And what about guys like Cory Trice, who we thought we might have seen already, or like a Monty Adams working his way back? Anything new with those guys?
Tomlin opened the door for Mon Adams to play this week. I was a little surprised by that. Haven't seen him do a whole ton at practice yet. Cory Trice is healthy, man. It's just a roster spot thing. They're just waiting, I think, to see if they can not have to, again, make a move that they have to make it. So there's he's ready if they want him, but they don't have to activate him before this game.
Gotcha. Okay. We have some questions we want to get into, but before we do that, just kind of want to open it up to like any of the conversations you potentially had around the building today. You said you talked to Broderick a bit about like Trey Hendricks of the Cincinnati Bengals, who leads the league in sacks. Like everybody talks about their offense. Obviously, defense hasn't been very good, but he has on the defensive side of the ball. What was that conversation like? What did he have to say about what I would consider one of the more underrated pass rushers in the NFL?
Yeah, I don't understand why we just spent a week as Steelers-Browns week talking about TJ Watt and Myles Garrett like this is a 2-man race for the Defensive Player of the Year award when like Trey Hendrickson's having a better year than both of those guys. Like it's not that close. And so I don't know. I went and talked to Trey Hendrickson plus 1,600 for NFL DPOY right now. 5th best odds behind Watt, Will Anderson, Daniel Hunter of the Houston Texans, and Xavier McKinney. Man, where's Dexter Lawrence at? He's having a better year than those guys too. These odds don't make any sense. The voters clearly don't know what they're doing. They proved that last year.
It seems to me like team records got to be baked into that, right? Because like no one on none of those guys are on a bad team.
Yeah,
and like that would be
up
there otherwise.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't know. I think Trey Hendricks is a really good player. Broderick seemed to think he's mostly going to go up against Dan Moore. Said like, he remembered talking to Dan about him last year and saying like, hey, this guy, it's like a really good battle every time. Like, it's not like, some players where like they'll come out with their like 1 or 2 moves a game that they're going to beat you with, but they don't give like 100% on every rep. And their sort of takeaway was he kind of wins with like hustle, right? Where he just like wears you down over the course of a game and doesn't ever let up. And I think he's really underrated. I don't know why more people aren't talking about not just this season. Like he's leading the league in sacks this year, but it's not like that's some kind of crazy like outlier season for him. He's been one of the better pass rushers in the league for years. He's coming off of 17.5 sacks last year. He's got 11.5 now. So on pace to do just slightly better than that this year. It's made 3 straight Pro Bowls. Got to think he's making a 4th. Like I don't know why he's not talked about like he's a superstar, because I think he is.
One of the members of that fantastic 2017 New Orleans Saints draft class that everybody talks about with Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, they were all drafted the same year. Pretty crazy. Marcus Williams, I believe, was part of that draft class as well from the Saints. But yeah, he's a very good player. I am curious. Like, I was going to ask about that too, if you knew how often he moved around, because I do feel like he primarily just rushes against the left tackle, and then they got like Sam Hubbard on the other side.
Yeah, Sam Hubbard doing a little bit of everything, playing some offense recently. It's interesting that the Bengals defense is struggling so mightily. I feel like we've touched on this, but like, they're missing some pieces like over the years that they haven't really replaced, but they're really good on the edge. Like Miles Murphy was our first round pick last year. He's still like kind of just a rotational guy now on the edge. Like they're really good on the edge. They're really good at linebacker. Like I don't know what more you want out of your linebackers than Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. Like those are two really good players. And who's the backup that play? He's really good too. Akeem Davis-Gather. Like that's three really good linebackers. Their edges are good. Like Mike Hilton's good. Geno Stone was great in Baltimore last year. Like, what? I don't know.
Cam Taylor-Britt was good last year, but he hasn't been as good this year. Like I don't know how close is the conversation with Cleveland?
Yeah,
like,
the whole is somehow less than the sum of the parts, and I don't. Part of it is definitely interior defensive line. They lost DJ Reader. They didn't really replace him. Sheldon Rankin's hurt. I don't know if he's going to play this week. Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson are young guys that are not like stepping in and filling the gap like I think they hoped. BJ Hill is there, and he's just kind of there. So like that's one obvious hole, and then they're banged up at outside corner. But I don't know. I get the feeling that like the league is a little figured out what Lou Anarumo was doing, and I'm not sure he's quite figured out what's next. Like, especially since he lost the dynamic safeties, it just doesn't seem like this defense has been the same.
No, I absolutely agree. And like I know they've had some injuries now, like you said, at outside corner, but it's not like they were playing well at the beginning of the year before those happened either. So like, I don't know that it can fall there either. But to that point, definitely do have the pass rush. That's something to keep an eye on. We actually got a question about one of these things that we'll bring up now, because Brooklyn, who watches the show religiously, shout out to Brooklyn, asked about Hard Knocks. I know you talked to Van Jefferson today. I think actually Broderick as well, and brought up the Hard Knocks thing. So, starting to film around there. What do those guys have to say about it? Are they looking forward to it?
Yeah, I talked to Van. Van was on it before when he was with the Rams, so that's why I wanted his perspective. And,
that's right. They did the Dole thing, right, with the Chargers as well the same year.
Yeah. And so he said, like, you just got to be a little more mindful of what you say. He said it's going to be like a bunch of guys on pins and needles, especially at the beginning, because you don't want to be the one to like give them a reason to pay attention to something, especially if it's negative. And I think especially in this setting too, like Tomlin talked about it like it's a challenge to overcome. Like we want to do this better than the other teams in the divisions. And you can guarantee what Tomlin meant by do this better is like be less interesting and therefore be on TV less. Like the least screen time you get, the happier the Steelers are going to be. And so I think we're going to get some very boring Pittsburgh Steelers over the next couple weeks.
I mean, we talked about it yesterday, but I'm curious to see what we get from George Pickens on Hard Knocks.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys that you kind of feel like is not really that horse is unbroken in terms of what he may or may not say. But the rest of the Steelers, I think, are going to keep things pretty locked up because I don't think they want to do this again, right? Like there's like a real motivation there where with this 4-team format, where if they come in, you're like, man, these guys are just the dullest, driest, least interesting group we have ever covered, then you pretty much guarantee they're never coming back. So if you're like one of the Steelers, like long-term stars, man, you have real motivation to make this as miserable as possible for the HBO crews that are doing the filming.
It still cracks me up. Tomlin was like, you know what? I'm not gonna name a starter until I have to. And then like George Pickens' first media availability after that. Yeah, Russell Wilson starting. So I'm curious to see what George is like on Hard Knocks for sure. But
are you excited to watch it just from a fan perspective? Are you I don't know. Have you watched it when it's not the Steelers?
Yes, I watch like all the Hard Knocks, and that's why I think there's a level of intrigue for me, just because it's like following an entire division now. Like, so it's almost, I understand that it's still a Hard Knocks series, but it's a bit different in that way. So I'm curious to see what, if anything, is different about the way that this is done, as opposed. And I think they got the right division for sure. So I'm just curious to see how it's all put together.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be good. I think the AFC North, I think the AFC North is the best division in football. I think it has the best rivalries. I think it's the most competitive year in and year out. And I think because it doesn't really have a big market city in it, it kind of gets pushed down by some of the networks and the talking heads in favor. Like I feel like people talk up the NFC East a lot, and I'm like, outside of Philly, none of those teams has won anything in like 10 years.
Yeah.
15 years, 20 years.
Yeah, specifically this year, the NFC North is very good, but like
it's very good
as a whole,
but it's been awful for a long time before. The Bears have been stuck in mud, the Lions have been the Lions, the Vikings hit or miss, the Packers have been a pretty good team. But yeah, I mean, I just think there's a lot to like about the AFC North. So I hope it shows the division in a good light and maybe bring some interest to what I think are some pretty awesome rivalries. But yeah, I don't think you're going to get much from the Steelers on this show that you're not normally getting.
Well, okay, so Brooklyn is probably a little bit disappointed with that answer. She said, for tonight, additional thoughts on Hard Knocks as they are there now. How do you think the team will deal with it? Do you think it becomes a distraction? Are they focusing on anyone in particular? I think that part of this question is interesting. We already kind of discussed this, right? Like, was this even before they were even announced for this? And it was like, if they were ever on Hard Knocks, who would be the star of it? I can't remember. But we had a conversation on here of like, who would be an underrated star if the Steelers were to be on Hard Knocks? Well, now they are on Hard Knocks. Alan, who do you think, if anybody, we just talked about how the Steelers probably want to downplay this thing, but who, if anybody, do you think will kind of be in the spotlight for the Steelers on this?
I don't know. That's a good question. No one willingly. I'm pretty sure about that. Who, like, non-willingly? Like, I think there are some guys that are funny personalities that are not star players that may shine through. Like, DeMonte KZ is a real character that I think a lot of people don't know. That could be a lot of fun. Trying to think of some other guys that are.
Listen, I know the thing here, because of what we're talking about with the Steelers putting an emphasis on downplaying this thing, like Hard Knocks, HBO, they would probably love to get E-Rob, but what they're going to get is a Landon Roberts, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, and he doesn't come out of practice that way a lot. Like he's the
he maybe turn it up, but he's not
maybe on a sideline now. Like a sideline, I think you could get some E-Rob, right? Like coming up back to the sideline after a bad play for the defense. Yeah, I'd like to hear that. I'd like to see what words are said when that happens. But at practice, you're not getting that. I'm trying to think of some other guys that are just generally like kind of like the class clowns or people that'll ham it up a little bit. But man, this is a Steelers team that's pretty buttoned up. I don't know.
Yeah, like guys that kind of seem like they could be like Goonie, like a Mason McCormick or something like that's just on the field, right? I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, the offensive linemen are funny, like in the locker room, and make jokes and stuff. But I don't know how much they're gonna capture. We'll see. I mean, I think Nick Herbig's personality, which doesn't really necessarily translate well to like 30-second interview clips because he's like total like Hawaiian beach boy vibe, but like I think that's someone who like honestly I really hate that. I'm gonna go off on a tangent here. I really hate that the NFL restricts us to like 90 seconds of video per day. That's all we're allowed to use combined between practice film, practice video, and locker room interviews. And like I think it really in a lot of ways prevents us from bringing out the personalities of the people. The Steelers will put out the full interviews, but only of like big scrums. So like, there's like 8 or 9, 10, 20 media members all like shouting questions at somebody, or it's like they're at the podium or the backdrop. And like, those aren't where you get the personality of a player to come out. That's just like the players there, like, having a pop quiz, basically, like, when we have conversations with these players, like 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or whatever, like that's when you really get to see who they are. It would be great if we could show some more of those that don't like the pressure is on to make my 90-second soundbite be something that's like going to go viral. And it's not like Nick Herbig like talking about the vibes in the locker room are so much better when he plays his Hawaiian music, and like, you know, him and Cole Holcomb like, you know, wrangling over the speaker control. Like those are the kind of stuff where like I don't know. I feel like people miss out on that, and it's a silly rule to me. I don't know what it's helping, but I think so. Like someone like Nick Herbig, I think is someone who like the media rules being what they are have kind of like prevented his personality from being more well known, and he's not like a star player where like CBS is going to sit down and put him on the, you know, the morning show interview, you know, like, so I just think he's someone like that is a pretty good player, that is a pretty like fun guy, and yeah, as a good personality that people would really like, that maybe they'll highlight a little bit.
That was one of the three that I was thinking, along with like George is George. I think some way he's going to find his way into this thing quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And then like I'm curious to see how it plays out in this setting, but just because of like the star power of Russ, I feel like they're going to want to have a spotlight on him, and also just the story.
The thing about Russ is that, like, there is no hidden camera Russell Wilson. Like, he is the same guy all the time, when the cameras are off or on. So like, you've already gotten everything you're going to get out of Russell Wilson because he's always that way. I just like, I don't think like the idea of this show is like to sort of portray people in a slightly different light. I think he's going to be boring to a producer of this show because he is Russell Wilson at the podium when he's everywhere.
They're gonna be like, Russ, can you please just take off the eye black for 1 second? I like.
We're here to film your family's Thanksgiving. Why are you putting cleats on?
Love it. We talked yesterday about the likelihood or lack thereof that Najee Harris would be back. This question, I'm going to change it just a little bit. AC Gonzalez, I don't think you'll mind. We're still going to answer this question, but Dan Moore Jr., who is also in a contract year, do we feel like with the way that he's played, obviously Fatanu's injury, you know, the way that Broderick Jones has played, do we feel like Dan Moore Jr. potentially has increased his chances at all to stay in Pittsburgh with his performance?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think the way that Dan Moore came back was if Dan kind of struggled and there wasn't going to be a big market for his services. The Steelers are starting Troy Fatanu and Broderick Jones at tackle next season. They drafted them in the first round for a reason. They're not going to pay another tackle starting salary. They will pay another tackle to be a swing backup and a veteran presence and yada, yada, yada. But like, Dan Moore is way out of that price range right now. Like, he's played himself into a very nice contract. And so I think
it's projection.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I haven't seen one, so I'm curious.
18 mil per. I think it was like 3 or 4 years. So
yeah, there you go. Go get it, Dan Moore. I wanted to talk to him about Henderson today, but he was busy carrying cases of flavored water into his locker. So there you go.
There you go. Oh, I didn't realize too until I clicked on this that there was actually a second question here. What do you think about Landon Roberts coming back? Wilson still needs more developing, in my opinion. Obviously, there's a role for him. I think there's a role for all three, though. Do you think that Landon Roberts could be back?
Yes, I do. I think the Steelers would love to have him back. I get the vibe that he would like to be back. They got to make the money work. Excuse me. But I would not be surprised at all if we see in the Landon Roberts contract extension for next year.
Same. I thought that he was one of the, like, somebody asked me, hey, like a sneaky extension candidate that we weren't talking about before this season started. And it wouldn't have surprised me if they wanted to add a year or two.
Yeah, and the question about Peyton Wilson, like, Wilson is not going to ever replace a Landon Roberts. Like, they're different, completely different places. They're totally different tools in our toolbox.
I guess
that's a hammer and a buzzsaw.
Yeah, I guess the thing would be like, do we think that Queen could do all the stuff that a Landon was doing, and then Peyton move into what Queen does? I don't know.
Maybe I like, but you're still gonna want that guy.
I agree.
From somewhere. No, you can go draft one. But I don't think E-Rob would break the bank.
We just talked about too, like, I think a lot of people still look at it as like 2 off-ball linebackers, but we just talked about what Cincinnati has with 3 really good ones, and like the Steelers could have that same thing.
Yeah, absolutely,
and do right now. So, all right. And the other thing I mentioned, just mentioned the Dan Moore thing, and Broderick Jones is part of that. The last question we got here, you'll recognize this name, Berg sports fan.
Oh yeah, what's up, buddy?
He wanted to know, do you think that you've seen the growth needed from Frazier, McCormick, and Jones on the right side to feel good about the trajectory of this offensive line? If not, do you still feel like all three of those guys are the guys next season?
Yeah, I mean, like I talked a lot about the offensive line this morning. So if you didn't check out today's episode of Morning Rush, I would recommend it. Growth is not linear. I'm not seeing like leaps and bounds development by the two interior guys, but they're both playing a lot better than I thought they would if they had to play as rookies. You get through the year and then you hope to improve and then you go from there. Broderick Jones, I think a little bit disappointed where he came into the year. That injury really took away his training camp. I thought that was a big hindrance to him improving from his first year to his second year. But I still really like the trajectory. He's a freakish athlete. He's strong. I think he's becoming more mature. Really good conversation with him, a long one today. And he kind of said I guess he was saying that last year in Cincinnati, TJ let him give the speech right before the game, like the last words before they came out of the locker room. And he was like, yeah, man, that's crazy as a rookie. He's like, but I was playing pretty well then, with like the sort of implication that like he feels like that he has some work to do to get back to that level. I'm not sure that's true. I think he's playing pretty well right now, but I like the sort of humility that sentence shows, to say like, hey, I was here and now maybe I feel like I'm here and I got to get back there. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to overreact to one game or anything like this, but on a short week on Thursday night, I was a little disappointed, especially with the interior. Like, I mean, and Myles Garrett obviously wrecked shop in a way that he can do on Thursday night, especially given that. And Isaac Seumalo, maybe too much attention being paid towards helping Dan Moore there. And Frazier was left on an island a lot. But the one where Garrett ends up basically one-on-one with Frazier right before half and gets him. I thought he had his worst day, but that's, saying a lot more about how he performed up to that point. I like where those guys are at for those, like, especially in the interior with specifically Frazier and McCormick. I think Jones still has a ways to go, but again, like, we knew this was a project when we drafted him and he had a ways to go. So
yeah,
I'm not pressing the panic button on anything there with the offensive line.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all. I think they're in good shape there.
Okay. Anything else, Alan?
No, I think that's it.
Anything that we didn't touch on, we could always touch on tomorrow. That's the great thing about doing this.
We missed something. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to hear.
There we go. Leave us a comment. Leave us a question. Alan, until then, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus using promo code Allen10 to get 10% off an annual subscription. It works out to be about $4 a month. Not only do you get all the best stuff from me, DB, Aaron Becker, the whole rest of the Steelers Now crew, but you get an ad-free viewing experience, which is worth the price of admission all by itself. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform so you don't miss an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive, Steelers Morning Rush. We got Sights and Sounds, we got practice interviews, we got post-game, we got Aaron Becker's new Steelers Spotlight show on Saturday coming up. Don't want to miss it. Hit that bell. You get a notification right to your phone, right to your tablet. Say, hey, look, new awesome stuff from Steelers Now. Click. There you go.
Does Wendy's still even do the 4 for $4?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was worried because I know they do the biggie bag things
it's
now.
5 though now. I think it's 5.
Oh, see? Yeah. All right. See, that's what I'm talking about. Nothing was the same. What happened to the game that I love? Anyways, as Alan said, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit us in the comments with your thoughts or a question, I should say. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You will find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Same thing on TikTok, Steelers Afternoon Drive, and then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.